When's it time to stop being cheap? And this is kind of comes from a request from email. The listener writes in, one topic I would be fascinated to hear you discuss on a podcast is not investing money, but spending it. For example, I've heard you discuss spending money on home renovations, travel, but you're still driving an older car and you're not getting a Tesla. How do you decide what to spend money on and what not to, especially after reaching FI? Is it after college, medical school, residency, fellowship, 2 to 5 years living like a resident? How does one transition to a degree to increasing spending after never really doing this? If you haven't worked on your spending muscle, how do you approach this? All right, let's talk about spending. There are really 5 money activities that you need to become good at in your life. The first is earning. The second is saving. The third is investing. The fourth is spending. And the fifth is giving. Most of us are better at some of these than we are at others. Frankly, I'm a pretty good saver. I also earn a lot of money, so I guess I'm pretty good at that too. And obviously, I run a blog called The White Coat Investor, so I'm a halfway decent investor, I like to think. I'm not as good at spending. It's something that's harder for me to do and to do well. And what do I mean by doing well? Well, spending well is spending money on stuff that's actually going to make your life better, where you're trading your time for money. I mean, rather trading money for time, more time in your life, where it is something that you would really value, and yet you're still not spending the money on it. That's a problem. That's being overly cheap. Um, I'm not that good at shopping, like comparison shopping. I shop like a hunter. I go out, I slay the beast, and I bring it home, right? The first beast I find. And so I'm not necessarily good at shopping. My wife is much better at it. She's far better at, comparing deals, finding good flights. She's always in charge of planning our overseas vacations because she'll take the time to go through and look at the Airbnbs and make sure they're close to what we're actually doing and get a good deal and make sure it's a nice place and all that kind of stuff. I tend to buy the first one I see. And so there is a skill to spending money, and you have to practice it, and you get better at it as time goes by. But I think mostly what we're talking about here is kind of when's it okay to spend more of your money? And let me give you a few guidelines that you may find helpful. One, if you don't have the money, you should be very frugal. Okay, when you are spending borrowed money, like you're a medical student living on loans, that should be probably the most frugal time in your life. You should probably not be buying anything that isn't an absolute necessity. Maybe a little something, a little splurge here and there, but nothing big. This is not the time in your life to be taking European vacations on student loan money. It's not actually even legal, right? Because you sign your promissory note that says you're just going to use the money for education. That's not the time to be spending tons of money. Same thing as you move into your training, right? When you are a resident, when you are a fellow, you're making the average American household income. You need to be living like the average American household. And if you've never done this before, I know many people grew up in the upper middle class or in the upper class, and this is their first time ever living in a household with the, average American household income. It might be a little weird for them to live on $50 or $60 or $70,000 a year. But I assure you, it doesn't involve brand new cars. It doesn't involve fancy vacations. It doesn't involve eating out all the time. It doesn't involve $2,000 handbags. It doesn't involve bottle service and heli skiing and all that kind of stuff that you can spend money on. So that's another time in your life where really you ought to be watching what you're spending. I tell people to live like a resident for 2 to 5 years after they finish their training. And, it's more of a principle than it is a fixed prescription, right? The idea is that you live your lifestyle much more like what you could afford as a resident than what you can afford as an attending. And since there's a huge gap between an attending income and a resident income, you use the difference between those two to build wealth, to pay off your student loans, to pay off credit cards you might have had left over, to pay off your car, to save up an emergency fund or a down payment, to max out your retirement accounts and really get a jump start on your retirement savings, to do all those kinds of things, all those great uses of money that we have right when we come out of training. That's what you live like a resident for 2 to 5 years after training for, is to do that. Obviously, most people don't do that. And that's okay. right? Give yourself a little raise. Give yourself a 10% raise or a 25% raise. Heck, give yourself a 50% raise. That would be huge in corporate America. Instead of living on $50,000, live on $75,000. Assuming you've got a median or better physician job and don't have crazy student loans, that's probably going to work out just fine anyway. So you're all this time you're spending a little bit more money as a resident than you did as a med student. You're spending a little bit more during your live like a resident period than you did as a resident. And then as you finish that period, you can also loosen the purse strings up some more, right? My recommendation for attendings is that they save 20% of their gross income for retirement. And this is obviously after the live like a resident period. Presumably, you've got medical school paid for at this point. But I believe that if you're saving 20%, you can spend the other 80% and should not feel guilty about it whatsoever. Go have a great time. You can have a wonderful life on 80% of what a doctor makes. You really can. It's pretty incredible. All the fun stuff that you can do and all the great stuff that you can have and all the wonderful people you can help on 80% of a physician income. So go ahead and loosen the purse strings up a little bit more at that point. Now, a lot of us who are good savers, we probably didn't do that. We were probably still saving 30, 40%, whatever, of our income and rapidly building wealth. We became millionaires within a few years, maybe multimillionaires, maybe became financially independent, right? And at a certain point, you go, what am I doing? What's life about? How much is enough? And you start loosening up a little bit more. I wrote a post on the blog in early 2015. I probably wrote it a few months before that and just didn't run it until then, called Loosening the Purse Strings. Now, where was I at in 2015? Well, I'd been a partner at that point for about 2.5 years. And we'd become millionaires at the end of 2013. So this was, a year and a half or so after becoming millionaires. And I'd been a partner for 2.5 years. WCI was starting to make some money, but it wasn't making a lot of money by early 2015. And we decided we were going to spend a little bit more money. So we started splurging on stuff that we hadn't bought before. We bought a fancy dining room table set. It was a lot of money for us at the time. It was $10,000 or $15,000 or something for all this nice furniture. And we started buying some other stuff. We did a little bit of a home remodel. That was a relatively minor one. Um, you know, we went on some more expensive vacations. Started spending more on trips. I bought a new mountain bike. It was a $5,000 or $6,000 bike, which was a huge upgrade from the one I'd had for years that I think I paid $1,000 for. We got a fancy new furnace. We upgraded our beater boat to a nice wake boat. So we were clearly loosening the purse strings at that point. And in that post, I give 10 questions that you should ask yourself and your partner before you start splurging. And let me give these to you. Number one, are you keeping your fixed expenses as low as possible so that in the event of economic downturn, you can rapidly pare back your lifestyle? Two, have you honestly determined your needs versus your wants? And I'm amazed that even doctors can't figure this out. Your needs are surprisingly little. Most of your life, in the words of Mr. Money Mustache, is an exploding volcano of wastefulness. And until you acknowledge that and recognize that, it's going to be hard for you to sort out needs versus wants. I'm not saying don't buy some wants. I'm saying understand what they are. Three, how many months have you been considering this purchase for? Right? Good spending is not spending on a whim. It's planned spending. It's something you really want that you've been thinking about for quite a while. Four, do you have the money in cash to purchase this item? It's really easy to be able to tell if you can afford something. Can you buy it in cash? If you can, you can afford it. If you can't afford it. It's really pretty straightforward. Number five, is this item going to make you happier than any other use of this amount of money? Six, are you already saving 20% of your gross income for retirement and enough to meet your other investing goals? Seven, do you have any consumer or student loan debt at all? Eight, do you have a plan to pay off your mortgage in less than 15 years total? Nine, are you buying this item at the best time of year to purchase it? There's lots of things that have a seasonality to them. You're better off buying a boat in November, for instance, than you are buying a boat on Memorial Day. 10, how much time have you spent researching and shopping around for this purchase? And I think if you can go through and have those discussions with yourself and with your partner, if applicable, then you can have some better guidelines on whether it's a good use of your money. But as time goes on, you'll find yourself being able to spend much more easily. Most of the time, it's far easier for me to spend money than it used to be, because after a while, you get out of that scarcity mentality. You realize you have enough and to spare. And that means you can not only give some of your money away, but you can spend some of it on yourself as well and should not feel guilty about it whatsoever. At a certain point in life, you will realize that time is the more valuable commodity, that health is the more valuable commodity, that you have far more money than you have time and ability to use it. And as you move into that stage of life, you'll start looking at some spending, going, "How can I not buy that? How can I not do that activity? How can I not purchase my time back by purchasing whatever it is, a service or good or whatever?" So I hope that's helpful to you as you consider spending, one of those 5 important money activities that you'll do in your life.
The hosts of the White Coat Investor podcast are not licensed accountants, attorneys, or financial advisors. This podcast is free entertainment and information only. It should not be considered professional or personalized financial advice. You should consult the appropriate professional for specific advice relating to your situation.